As far as back as I can remember, we've always hired the same way. Nothing has changed. Well, if you're going to do it the same way, you're going to get the same results. And so to me, some of the big challenges, it's not a database decision-making process for the most part. It's gut feeling. There's a lot of bias within that process. It stems from there where we don't make objective decisions in the process. We go with gut feeling. And often that gut feeling is incorrect.
Welcome to the Great Talent, Great Business Podcast, your go-to resource for building exceptional teams and thriving businesses. Each episode delivers actionable insights on harnessing offshore talent, integrating innovative technology, cultivating a vibrant company culture, and attracting and retaining top performers. Subscribe now to never miss an episode. For more resources, visit greattalentpodcast.com. where you can download this episode's free worksheet designed to help you apply today's insight to your business. And now, here's your host, Rob Levin.
Today, I'm joined by Michael Deutsch. He is a seasoned business leader and certified EOS implementer, specializing in helping small and mid-sized businesses break through growth ceilings to achieve lasting success. As managing partner of the Deutsch Group, he has guided leadership teams to improve team dynamics, increase profitability, and drive sustainable growth. Michael brings a wealth of hands-on experience in scaling businesses, optimizing productivity, and fostering high-performing cultures. He also owns Sapphire Talent, which helps companies be more successful by hiring the right people. Michael, thanks for coming, and it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Let's dive right in.
Thanks, Rob. That was a mouthful, by the way. Thank you, though.
Yeah, well, we got through it. Michael, let's start with hiring. What are most companies missing out with respect to hiring? I think small and mid-sized businesses do so many things well, and hiring is usually not one of them. What's going on there?
I think the hiring process in and of itself is a bit broken. When you're a big-sized company, when you're the Googles of the world, when you have McKinsey's at your back, you have all of the data to support the ability to change your hiring process. But if you look at small and mid-sized companies, we've always been doing it the same way, right? I always say it's been decades. As far as back as I can remember, we've always hired the same way. Nothing has changed. Well, if you're going to do it the same way, you're going to get the same results. And so to me, some of the big challenges, it's not a database decision-making process for the most part. It's gut feeling. There's a lot of bias within that process. And it stems from there where we don't make objective decisions in the process. We go with gut feeling. And often that gut feeling is incorrect. And so that leads to bad hires. I think it starts from there.
Yeah. Given that, where should companies start in terms of improving their hiring process?
I think it initially has to start with a mindset change. We have to recognize the fact that we're not good at hiring. Even if we think we're good at hiring, take a look at the data to see that. So many of my clients, they tend to use the exception as the rule and say, well, I made a great hire. So-and-so was phenomenal. Great. Well, how many people have you hired over your career? And you're pointing to the one or two exceptions that happen to be great. Do you want to have a 10%, 20% success rate at hiring, or would you rather have it the other way at 90%? Right? It's never going to be perfect. It's always intangibles in the hiring process, but we want to improve that success rate as much as we can.
So, and when it comes to success, is it about hiring just a good person, or is it about really focusing on hiring great talent for each particular role? How do you think about that?
I think it's a little bit of both. You need both sides of the equation to be successful. You need the good person, the person who's successful, who has the ability to be successful. And you need the person who potentially has proven that they can be successful, they can do the job, if that's the question that I'm hearing. And you need a little bit of both. So when you go through an interview process, and this is part of the challenge too, I think, in changing that mindset, is we don't dig deep enough to understand if the person can do it, if they are the right person. We have to get a little bit away from, I love this person, he's great. Hey, I love Rob. Rob is great. Let me bring him in and stick him in a seat somewhere. But I don't even know what you're great at. So there is a little bit of Rob is great, I want to bring him in, but then I need to figure out where Rob's strengths are. And where can we leverage that? And what's the best seat in the organization for Rob? You need a little bit of both.
So give us a little bit more, Michael, in terms of how do you evaluate that? It's just about asking specific questions. Is there something else? Is it multiple interviews? What are we talking about?
So it's a little bit of everything. First of all, we need to shift to this data-based approach. You need to be tracking information as you're going through an interview process. And it can't be a one source of information type of process, meaning very often the manager will do the interview. They may have a recruiter who goes through the basics of it at first, and then the manager does an interview and the manager hires the person based on gut feeling. You need multiple sources of data here to help do that. And I think, yes, as you go through an interview process, asking the one or two simple questions that traditionally we've Googled, what's the best interview question to ask or something like that, you need to go away from that. I tell clients, I go by the rule of three, meaning that I start a question and then I ask at least three questions along that chain.
Like follow-up questions?
Follow-up questions, correct. Yeah. Along the same chain. And I'm looking to uncover how they handle the situation or how they may handle, because there's really two types of conversations there. Situational, behavioral, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but ask follow-up questions to really start to dig out and be curious. Not interrogating them, but we want to be curious about the story that they're telling us to really pull out, can they do this job?
Is it something as simple as tell me more, or can you give me a different example?
Yeah, it can be tell me more. That's a great way of starting it.
The follow-up questions, right? I just want to
that would be a great next question. Question number two. Tell me about a situation where you did X, Y, and Z, and they start to tell you, you can go tell me more. I like to actually pull pieces of that. Oh, so you were working on this project. Who did you work with on that project? Which team members were at play? Did you get stuck on the project? When you did get stuck, what did you do to get unstuck? Who did you rely on? If I were to call that person and ask that person about this project, what would they tell me about that project? And there's a lot of questions like that. Again, I'm just throwing stuff out there, but go into it with curiosity and ask more pointed questions, open-ended questions, of course, but ask more pointed questions that follow up into the story.
And then what are you looking for in those follow-up questions, in the responses to those questions?
Well, I think you're looking at a few things. On the one hand, you're looking to make sure that the person is telling you the right story. So you ask one question, someone gives you an answer, you may believe them at face value. By digging in a little bit more, you're really going to start to understand that they actually do this.
So you're looking for integrity to start, and then what? Tell me more. What else?
That's a good second question, Rob. Thank you. You're looking for integrity to start. You're also looking for their thought process. So one of the things that you want to be careful of around mindset is, do they have the ability and can they do the job? Not necessarily have they done exactly this before, because it's almost impossible to say that they could solve your specific problem, because every environment is different. Your culture, your processes, your people are going to be very different. But I want to understand how you've handled a situation like this in the past and the process that you've gone through to solve that issue, because that's going to give me an indicator of how you're going to approach the problem in the future. If they haven't done something like this, behavioral questions, we want to find out, how would you handle this problem? You haven't done it before, and that's okay. How might you approach this problem? Tell me a little bit more. What is your thought process going to be to handle this problem? So it's the integrity and a little bit of an indicator about how they're going to think when they're actually on board.
Yeah. So at the risk of seeming a little obvious, it seems to me, it's very clear to me that you got to think about those questions well ahead of the interview.
Yes.
It's not something you should be winging. Maybe the follow-up questions, but those big block questions, you got to think about those things in advance, and they should be specific for the role you're trying to fill, it sounds like. Is that right?
100%. One of the things that we teach and we talk about in Sapphire is that this is a job. Hiring is not something that you just layer into your position. You have to be prepared and you have to take it seriously. And I've told my EOS clients too, if someone's not taking it seriously, guess what? They're off the hiring team. It doesn't matter if they're the manager. If they're not going to take it seriously, they're going to make bad hires. And if they make bad hires, that's expensive. It's expensive, and it can create toxic issues within the organization, which we can get into culture, but you don't want to bring a toxic personality into your team. The impact on your team is going to be tremendous. So you have to be prepared. You have to prepare your questions in advance. In fact, I would tell you that you want to prepare them well ahead of even starting the interview round, because if you're going to be fair and you're going to measure people evenly and equally, you need to ask the same questions of every single individual, at least that first question. You could ask different follow-up second questions, but if I ask you a question around how you handle the specific situation, I need to ask that same specific situation question of every candidate in the pipeline. because it's only fair. How else do I measure one against the other if I'm kind of
Yeah.
zigzagging and pinballing around?
Yeah, I don't even think it's a matter of fairness. It's a way of evaluating people, right? Because if you
Right.
give the same question, it gives you a little bit of a baseline there. I get that. And thank you for sharing that. Switching gears just a little bit, so many businesses now are hiring for roles that are remote or maybe hybrid. In, in the hiring, how do you assess whether or not somebody's going to be good, not just good, maybe even great in a remote or hybrid environment?
I think remote and hybrid is still, in my opinion, it's still a little bit of a challenge. I don't know that we've fully unlocked that yet. What I would tell you from experience and from what I'm seeing is that the success of a remote or hybrid individual goes back into hiring. You need to be even more diligent about your hiring process when you're hiring for a remote or virtual person, because everything is exaggerated when you're remote because everyone's not together. Cultural differences are felt more extremely. The person's inability for, perhaps, I don't want to say inability, that might be the wrong way of putting it, but the person needs to be a self-starter. They need to be great at self-management. We really have to dig into that to make sure they can do that, because there's that disconnect. We're not there, we're not seeing them in person. I think there's a reason why many of the bigger organizations, we're reading it all over the place now, they're going back to in person and they're shifting away from remote. And I think that's part of the reason why, is that it can be very hard to manage remote unless you're really diligent about having the right people in those remote positions who are good with the culture and really good at the position, and they're good at self-management, self-awareness, and they can get engaged. And we have to engage them as well. That's also important too.
This episode is brought to you by Work Better Now, your trusted partner for getting high-performing talent from Latin America. Our clients tell us that partnering with Work Better Now has transformed their businesses by providing the proactive, reliable, and skilled professionals that they need to thrive. Ready to build your dream team? Visit workbetternow.com to schedule your consultation today. As a special thank you to listeners of the Great Talent, Great Business podcast, we're offering $150 off your first 3 months. Just mention great talent during your consult. Join the businesses building their dream teams and take the next step in transforming yours today. You know Work Better Now quite well because you got us started on EOS as our implementer, and we're 100% remote. And I can tell you that what's worked well for us, and this is just in general, I'll peel it back to hiring. What's worked very well for us is building all of those things that you mentioned earlier into our culture. All of that's done by design, and over communicating is a part of it. Actually, EOS in itself is a great tool for remote as well, right? Because KPIs don't lie, and everybody's got a KPI. Now, on the hiring side, one of the things I've asked, I'm not involved in too much hiring in the company as the visionary, but when I do speak with people, one of the things I love to ask is, tell me about the best places you've worked and what was great about them. And look, if they say, hey, I just loved being around all the people, that tells me I have to dig a little bit deeper at the very least to see how they're going to work, in our case, 100% remote environment.
Yeah. The interesting thing I think about your business model compared to what we were talking about before, where you have businesses themselves managing their remote or hybrid people. The difference is with a Work Better Now, that's your business. So you're fully engaged with your remote professionals, right? That's your job and that's what you have to do. You have to make sure that they're engaged and they're performing. When it's the business themselves, sometimes it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. It's not their business model to manage remote people. That's your business model. So they tend to get a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, and it becomes that much more important for the business who's managing the remote individual to make sure they've got it right. When they work with you, the benefit is you've got the culture, you've got the KPIs, you're managing these people and keeping them engaged on behalf of the client. And I think that's a huge benefit.
Sometimes depends. The clients usually, the ones who are doing very well, which is probably most of our clients, in our case, offshore, but any remote employee, are doing all those things that we talked about, which is, again, culture by design. I can think off the top of my head, I don't think you know him, even though he's here in New York with us, Larry Zogby, RDS Delivery. And as an example, when he onboards somebody, they virtually get introduced to everybody in the company, not only the other remote people, but the people in the office. And if you think about that, back in the old days when we were all in the office, somebody walked around, right? Like, oh, meet
Right,
Joe,
introduce you.
our new employee. And of course, a lot of companies don't do that in a remote or hybrid environment, and they're missing out, right? Because it's the lack of intentionality.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not excusing the business or the business owners and shifting full responsibility. They still have to own it, but I think that the added layer of a company like Work Better Now, who's got all of that built in, takes some of the burden, not
Yeah.
all of the burden,
Yeah.
but some of the burden off of the pressure off of the remote hybrid environment.
Yeah. And for us, obviously we're assessing them in the hiring
Yeah.
process. And then the onboarding, I think, goes a long way. I'm going to switch gears again, Michael. When it comes to growing a business, hiring and talent, well, let's just say hiring is a big part of the equation, but it's not the only part of the equation.
Sure.
Other than hiring, what's the biggest challenge that you see business owners facing when it comes to getting the most out of their teams?
The biggest challenge that business owners are facing when they want to get the most out of their teams, unfortunately, I think it goes back to the right people. And that's probably the biggest challenge. I think that we still hesitate to really understand what the right people in an organization looks like. It kind of goes back into Dan Sullivan's who, not how. And I think that's the challenge is they don't have the right who's in place, which in turn then makes the how the challenge, right? And the business owners themselves, and even the leaders, the right leaders who don't have the right who's underneath them, struggle with the how. And so I think that to me, unfortunately, it goes back to the root cause of hiring, right? If we made the right hire in the first place, we'd have the right who's in place, which then alleviates that bottleneck and the struggles of the owners and the leadership teams. But I go back into we have to have the right people within the organization. I would argue that in EOS, we say 80 or 85% of the challenges of your business can be found in your accountability chart, which is basically the structure and the people of your organization. Well, why? Because so much overlays on top of that, including process, including data, there's so many components that run through the people of your organization. To me, that's the biggest challenge is making sure that we've got the right people within the organization.
Okay, so now a company, maybe they worked with Sapphire or maybe they worked with us, whatever it is, they have the right people in place, right? Not all of them, but most of them. Where do you see companies getting stuck? Asked another way, actually, I asked this to our common friend, Chris Beer, the other day. When a company comes to them and say, hey, I need your help, what Chris and I discovered was what they think the problem is usually not what the problem is. What do you see? I mean, you have your client base and you talk to new companies all the time. Once they have the right people in place and things still aren't necessarily working well, what are those things that are slowing them down or that they need to improve in order to get back on the rocket ship?
There's so many potential issues. By issues, I mean things that we could be looking at. Doesn't necessarily mean challenges. It could be processes. They don't have the right processes. They don't have any processes in place. So that it just feels like they're winging it. They get different results all the time. Quality starts to suffer because of it. Eventually, as these organizations grow, the irony here is that sometimes, actually often now that I think about it, companies don't come to EOS or they don't come to me because they're stuck with what you might think the traditional stuff is, the revenue, the profit type of thing. They're okay with sales and profit right now. They're stuck elsewhere. And when you get past the people part of it, do you have where are they struggling? Oh, it's a quality issue, right? Our customer service levels are down. We're delivering poor services. We're not delivering on time. What's going on over there? And you start to unpack it, and they're not tracking any data in the organization. They have no idea how the company is performing. They have process issues. They have, like I said, they have no processes, or they have poor processes, or they have potentially people issues lower in the organization. Because look, you're never going to have perfection in terms of the perfect environment, but perhaps there are people lower in the organization who are not following the processes. And then unfortunately, we're getting different results, and that's impacting quality. These are the common things that we typically see, or that I typically see. It's kind of in those areas that I think is where the bottlenecks start to creep up and we get quality issues.
Yeah, process KPIs is what I heard. But really, what you said without saying it is, it's still usually a people issue.
Yeah, it's still a people issue.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Michael, this has been fantastic, and thanks so much for joining the show. Where can people find out more about the Deutsch Group as well as Sapphire Talent?
You can go to sapphire-talent.com for Sapphire Talent. For the Deutsch Group, actually, the best way is to just reach out to me directly. It's michael.deutsch, DEUTSCH, at eosworldwide.com.
Gotcha. And just for everybody there, his name's right in the corner there. Michael, thanks
Perfect.
again. It was great to
Rob,
see you.
thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening and watching. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. The Great Talent, Great Business podcast is brought to you by Work Better Now. Don't forget to review, subscribe, and download the worksheet for this episode at the link below. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on LinkedIn at Great Talent, Great Business, or visit greattalentpodcast.com.